It was the day I discovered that my entire life had been a lie. My father, the man who raised me, the person who had always been my hero, turned his back on me in the most shocking way. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, his expression cold and distant, as if I were a stranger. I couldn't understand what was happening. Then, in the most heart-wrenching moment, he said it. "You're not my real daughter," he spat, as if the words were poison. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The air around us felt thick, like I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, though my voice trembled. He didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he stared down at the table, his fingers tapping lightly, almost rhythmically. "You were never supposed to be part of this family. I've been trying to protect my inheritance, and your grandmother's will. Well, you're not even her real granddaughter." Those words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. It felt as if my entire world had crumbled in an instant. My own father had disowned me, claiming I wasn't his daughter, all for the sake of money. I could hardly believe what he was saying. Was this real? How could this be happening? He continued, his voice low and full of disdain. "I'm doing this to protect my future, and I've made sure that you're not included in her will. You'll never see a dime of her money. It's over. Just go." Tears welled up in my eyes as I stood up, unable to form words. I was shaking, struggling to process what he had just done. How could someone I had trusted for my entire life turn on me like this? But as I left the kitchen, there was one thought that lingered in my mind. If I wasn't his real daughter, then who was I really? And why was he doing this? I didn't want to believe that he could be this cruel, but the reality was sinking in. My heart ached as I walked away from the only family I thought I had. The day seemed to stretch on endlessly, but my mind was racing, trying to figure out how to make sense of everything. The one thing I knew for sure was that I needed answers. I needed to understand what had really happened. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. What I would uncover would change my life forever. And the worst part? I didn't even know who to trust anymore. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I needed to fight back. And that's when I made a decision that would set everything in motion. Just as I was about to reach for my phone, ready to make a call that would change everything, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? Would they bring me the answers I desperately needed? Or was this another piece of the puzzle that would only make things worse? I opened the door, and the shock of seeing who was standing there was enough to make my blood run cold. The person standing in front of me had the power to either expose the truth or bury it forever. The figure standing at my door was a man I had never expected to see again. It was my uncle, Richard. He was my father's younger brother, but unlike my father, he was always a mystery to me. He had disappeared from our lives when I was just a child, and now, here he was, standing in front of me, looking like he'd just stepped out of a time machine. His face was older, more worn down, but there was something about his eyes, his expression, that felt oddly familiar, like he carried a heavy burden that he couldn't shake off. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice low, almost as if he were afraid someone might overhear. I didn't know what to say. The tension from my father's betrayal was still fresh in my chest, and I felt completely unprepared to deal with any more family drama. But something in Richard's eyes made me hesitate. He seemed different now, quieter, like he knew something that he wasn't ready to share. "Sure, come in," I said, stepping aside to let him pass. I couldn't shake the feeling that his visit was no coincidence, especially with everything that had happened earlier with my father. We sat down at the kitchen table, and I tried to steady my nerves. I wasn't sure if I was ready for more secrets or more lies, but the truth was, I needed answers. My father had already taken away everything I had believed in. Now it was time to find out why. Richard didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, his hands clasped together, staring at the table like he was weighing something heavy. I felt the weight of the silence, unsure whether I should ask him what had brought him here. But before I could say a word, he finally spoke. "I know you're hurt," Richard began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to make things worse. But there are things about our family, about your father, that you don't know. Things that might help explain why he did what he did. I felt a surge of hope in my chest, mixed with fear. Could it be? Was this the moment I had been waiting for? The chance to understand why my father had thrown me aside like I meant nothing? You're going to hate me for telling you this, Richard continued, his gaze never lifting from the table. But your father, he wasn't always the man you think he is. And you weren't always the daughter he thought he had. His words hit me like a slap in the face. What was he saying? What did he mean? You're not my real daughter. Those words, still fresh in my mind, rang in my ears. I couldn't believe it. Richard was telling me something was even darker than I imagined. Richard looked up at me then, his eyes filled with sorrow. I never wanted to hurt you, but there's more to the story. I need you to hear me out before you make any decisions. It's about your grandmother's will, and it's about your father's secrets. I sat there, frozen. I didn't know whether to be angry, confused, or relieved that I was finally hearing something that might make sense of the twisted puzzle my life had become. Richard paused, as if he was gathering his thoughts, and then he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. You were never meant to inherit anything from your grandmother. That's why your father cut you out of the will. But the truth is, there's more to this than you know. And if you're willing to listen, I can tell you what's really going on. His words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I knew I should feel angry, betrayed, and afraid, but instead, I felt a strange sense of curiosity. What could Richard be talking about? What could be so important that my father had gone to such extreme lengths to keep me from knowing the truth? I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Tell me everything, I said, my voice steady but desperate. I want to know what's really going on. What is it about the will? What did my father do to me? Richard took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought he might back out. But then he nodded slowly, as if making a decision. I'm going to tell you, but you have to promise me you won't tell your father I came to you. It's not safe yet. My mind raced. Safe? What did that even mean? What could be so dangerous about the truth that Richard was afraid to speak freely? Before I could respond, Richard leaned in closer and whispered, The truth about your grandmother's will isn't what you think. Your father is hiding something, and it's about to change everything. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father had hidden something from me all this time, something so big that Richard was risking his own safety to tell me. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say a word, the doorbell rang. It was a sound that echoed through the house, sending a chill down my spine. Who could it be now? Richard's face went pale. Don't answer it, he whispered urgently. It could be someone looking for you. Someone who doesn't want you to know the truth. I froze. Could it be? Was someone else involved in this twisted web of secrets? The knock on the door came again, louder this time. The knock on the door echoed through the house, sending an icy chill down my spine. I could feel Richard's tension building in the air, his eyes darting nervously toward the door. Who is it? I whispered, my voice barely audible. My mind raced, trying to figure out who would be at my doorstep at this hour. Was it someone from my father's side? Someone who knew about the will? Or, worse, someone who wanted to silence us? Richard didn't answer at first. His eyes locked on mine, filled with a mix of fear and urgency. Don't open the door, he muttered, his voice tight. I don't know who it is, but we don't have time for this. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't move. I wanted to know the truth. But what was going on? Who was outside? And why was Richard so afraid? The knock came again, more insistent this time. The sound was almost deafening, as if whoever was on the other side wasn't going to leave until they were let in. I looked back at Richard, whose face had gone ashen. He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for something, and then said in a low voice, I think it's time you knew everything. Everything. I repeated, my voice shaky. What do you mean? Richard stood up abruptly, walking to the door, though he didn't unlock it. He pressed his ear against the wood, listening for any sounds from the other side. His hand hovered near the doorknob for a moment before he turned back to me. You've been lied to, and it's about to catch up with you. Your father's actions, they go much deeper than just the will. And if you don't act now, you could lose everything. I don't know if you're ready for this, but you're about to be thrown into a world you can't escape from. His words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I didn't know what he meant by a world you can't escape from, but it sounded like something out of a nightmare. I felt an unsettling sense of urgency in the pit of my stomach. What was happening? Was my family really capable of all this? What could they possibly be hiding from me? Richard, please, I begged, my voice trembling now. What's going on? Who's at the door? He hesitated for a moment, then turned back to face me, his expression darkening. It's someone who knows the truth. Someone who has been watching your father for years. If you let them in, everything will change. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized what he was implying. Someone else knew. And if they knew, then that meant they were part of this tangled mess I was in, a mess I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I couldn't just ignore the knock. I had to know who it was and why they were here. But at the same time, Richard's warning hung over me like a dark cloud. The knock came again, louder this time, as if the person outside was demanding to be let in. Richard, we can't just stand here, I said, my voice tight with fear. What do we do? His eyes flickered to the door, then back to me. There was a moment of silence before he spoke again, his voice softer this time. You have to be careful. I don't know what they want, but if you open that door, it might be the beginning of everything falling apart. It might be the last thing you ever do. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with all the possibilities. But there was no turning back now. I had to know the truth. I couldn't live with the uncertainty any longer. I couldn't be left in the dark. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. Don't do this, Richard pleaded, but I could hear the fear in his voice. It was too late for him to stop me. I opened the door, and standing in the doorway was someone I never thought I'd see again, someone who made my heart drop into my stomach. It was my father. But this wasn't the father I remembered. His face was gaunt, and his eyes looked hollow, as though something had drained the life from him. He was dressed in a dark suit, his hands shaking slightly as he stood on the porch. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice tight with urgency. You need to listen. It's about the will. About everything. I stood frozen, staring at him, unsure what to say. My father who had torn me apart and cast me out, was standing here, in front of me, looking like a man who had nothing left to lose. Richard was beside me now, his face filled with worry. He didn't say anything, but his body language screamed that this was the moment we'd all been dreading. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you want from me? My father's eyes flickered briefly toward Richard, then back to me. There was something in his gaze, a sense of desperation, like he had no other choice but to tell me what he had hidden for so long. Please, come inside, he said softly. We need to talk. You need to understand the truth. But what truth was he talking about? Was this the moment everything would finally be revealed, or was I walking into a trap I couldn't escape? I didn't know. But there was only one way to find out. I stepped aside and let my father into the house. And as he crossed the threshold, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was just beginning. What was he about to say? And what had he really been hiding all these years? The door clicked shut behind my father as he stepped into the living room. The air felt thick with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I knew, everything I thought I understood about my life, was about to be shattered. Sit down, my father said, his voice surprisingly calm considering the situation. He gestured to the couch, but I stood frozen, not sure if I should trust him or not. Richard, still standing beside me, didn't say anything. His eyes flickered between me and my father, his body tense, as if ready to step in at any moment. I finally sat down, my heart pounding in my chest. My father took a seat across from me, his hands folded in his lap. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was unbearable, thick with years of unresolved tension. Then, my father spoke, his voice low and measured. "I know you're confused. And I know you hate me for what I did. But I need you to understand that this wasn't something I wanted. It wasn't even something I planned." I could feel my stomach drop at his words. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaky. "What wasn't something you planned? What are you talking about?" He looked down at his hands, as though gathering the strength to continue. When he looked back up at me, his eyes were filled with regret, something I hadn't seen in years. "I didn't want to cut you out of the will," he said quietly. "But your grandmother, she made me do it. She forced my hand." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My grandmother? The woman who had been the rock of my childhood, the one who had always treated me like her own? How could she have done something like this? "What do you mean?" I asked again, my voice rising slightly. "Why would she do that? Why would she make you cut me out of the will?" My father took a deep breath before continuing. "Because you're not really her granddaughter." I froze, the world around me seeming to slow down. "What?" "I'm not your biological father," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your real father is someone else. And your grandmother knew it. She found out, and she made me promise to keep it a secret. She told me if I didn't, she'd make sure you never saw a cent of the inheritance." I sat there, speechless. I had always known something was off. Something had never felt quite right about my family, but this was more than I could process. "You're lying," I finally managed to say, though my voice didn't sound as confident as I wanted it to. "This doesn't make any sense." "I wish I were," my father said, his voice filled with an aching sorrow. "But I'm not. Your real father is someone from your mother's past, someone she kept hidden from everyone, even me. I didn't know until recently, and when I found out, your grandmother, she insisted that I make sure you never knew." I shook my head, trying to make sense of it all. How could this be true? How could everything I thought I knew about myself be a lie? My mind was racing, but it felt like the more I tried to understand, the more everything slipped through my fingers like sand. "I didn't want to do it," my father continued. "But your grandmother had this power over me. She threatened to destroy me if I didn't go along with it. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you in the dark, by not telling you the truth. But now I see how wrong I was." I felt a lump form in my throat, tears threatening to spill. "So, you lied to me. You and Grandma. You both lied to me my entire life." He nodded, his face filled with guilt. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you." The weight of his words hit me harder than anything I had ever experienced. It felt like my entire world had collapsed in an instant. My father, the man I had looked up to my entire life, had not only kept the truth from me but had been complicit in keeping me from something that could have changed my life. And my grandmother, the woman I thought was my rock, had been the mastermind behind it all. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Why are you telling me this now, after all these years?" "I don't know," he replied, his voice cracking. "I guess I just couldn't carry it anymore. I thought if I told you the truth, you might have a chance to find out who your real father is. Maybe you'll want to know him. Maybe you'll want to see what's been kept from you all this time." I didn't know how to respond. My mind was spinning, and the room felt like it was closing in on me. My real father? The man I had never known? Who was he? Why hadn't anyone told me about him before? I looked over at Richard, who was still standing by the door, watching us both with a mixture of concern and caution. He hadn't said a word, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He knew how devastating this was for me. "I'm sorry," my father repeated, his voice barely audible now. "I'm so sorry." The words seemed hollow, like they didn't mean anything anymore. They didn't change what had happened. They didn't take away the years of lies, the years of confusion. But as I sat there, staring at the man who had once been my father, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let this be the end of my story. I had to know the truth. I had to find out who my real father was and what he had to do with all of this. But where would I even begin? And more importantly, was this the start of something even worse? Something I wasn't prepared for? I didn't know. But one thing was certain, I was going to find out, no matter what it took. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was spinning with questions that had no answers. I kept replaying what my father had said over and over in my head. Your real father is someone else. Your grandmother knew it. She made me keep it a secret. The words echoed in my ears like a constant hum that I couldn't escape. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. How could my grandmother have kept something like that from me? How could she have treated me like family for all those years, knowing I wasn't even her blood? And why had my father agreed to keep this a secret? Had he ever truly cared about me, or was I just a pawn in some twisted game? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I reached over, picked it up, and saw that it was a text message from Richard. We need to talk. I don't know what you're planning, but you need to be careful. I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. What did he mean by that? What was I supposed to be careful about? I thought about ignoring it, but I knew I couldn't. Richard was the only person who had been by my side throughout all of this, and if anyone understood the weight of the situation, it was him. I quickly typed a reply, "Come over. We need to talk about this." It didn't take long before Richard arrived at my place. I opened the door, and he stepped in, his face serious. His usual laid-back demeanor was gone, replaced with an air of urgency. "You look like you haven't slept," he said, glancing around at the darkened room. I nodded. "I haven't. I can't stop thinking about everything my dad said. I don't know what to believe anymore, Richard. I don't even know where to start." He sighed and sat down on the couch next to me. "I can't imagine what you're going through right now. But I think you're getting yourself worked up over things you can't change. The truth is out there now. You need to focus on what comes next." But how do I even start looking for my real dad? How do I even know where to begin? I asked, my voice cracking. Richard's expression softened. "You have options, you know. You could start by contacting a lawyer, maybe someone who specializes in family law. They could help you trace your biological father. And if your grandmother really did have the power to influence your dad, she probably has some kind of record of it. There's a chance you can find something that'll give you more answers." I swallowed hard, trying to hold back tears. The idea of searching for my real father felt like opening a door to a world I wasn't ready for, one that could possibly change everything I thought I knew about myself. It was terrifying, but at the same time, it felt like the only way forward. "I don't even know if I want to meet him," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if he doesn't even want me? What if he doesn't care?" Richard reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You can't control what he does. But you deserve to know the truth. And if he's a good person, he'll want to know you. You can't let fear stop you from finding out who you really are." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. What if the truth wasn't what I hoped for? What if it was worse? There was a long pause before Richard spoke again. "You should also think about your grandmother. I know she's been a huge part of your life, but the fact that she kept this from you, that's not something you just overlook. You need to decide what role she plays in your life moving forward." I hadn't even considered that. The thought of confronting my grandmother, the woman I had always admired and looked up to, felt like a betrayal in itself. How could I look at her the same way again after what I had just learned? "I don't know if I can ever look at her the same way again," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. Richard's expression was sympathetic. "I get it. But you can't let this define who you are. You have the power to decide how much influence she has in your life. And if she was part of this whole mess, you don't owe her anything. His words stuck with me as I lay in bed later that night. What was I supposed to do next? My world had been turned upside down, and I felt like I was standing on shaky ground, unsure of where to step. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination I hadn't felt in days. I had spent so much time processing my anger and confusion that I hadn't really thought about what I could do with this information. But now, I knew what I had to do. I was going to start my search. I wasn't going to let fear or uncertainty hold me back. I deserved to know the truth about my real father. And if my grandmother had kept secrets from me, then I would face that head-on, too. I was going to take control of this situation and uncover the truth, no matter where it led. But I also knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I wasn't sure what I would find, and I wasn't sure who I would become in the process. But I was ready. Or at least, I had to be. As I made my way to the computer to start my search, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from my father. I know you're upset, but you need to be careful. Your grandmother isn't as innocent as you think. She has her own reasons for everything she's done. I stared at the message, my heart racing. What was he trying to say? And what did he mean by that? What had my grandmother really been hiding all these years? I had to know. And I was willing to do whatever it took to uncover the truth. The days following my father's cryptic message were filled with an overwhelming sense of urgency. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. Your grandmother isn't as innocent as you think. She has her own reasons for everything she's done. What could that mean? What secrets had she been hiding for all these years? I felt as if I was standing at the edge of a cliff, peering into the unknown. The more I tried to uncover the truth, the more questions I had. I had already contacted a lawyer and started the process of tracing my biological father, but now there was the added weight of figuring out my grandmother's role in all of this. She had always been the rock of our family, the one person I trusted more than anyone else. But now, it felt like everything I knew about her was a lie. One afternoon, as I sat in my apartment, scrolling through old family photos on my laptop, I received another text message, this time from my grandmother. We need to talk. It's time you knew the truth about everything. Come over tomorrow, and I'll explain it all. My heart skipped a beat. For the first time since all this had started, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she would finally come clean. Maybe this would be the chance to get the answers I had been looking for all along. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze, preparing myself for the conversation I would have with her the next day. I was anxious, but there was a part of me that was also relieved. It felt like the storm had been brewing for so long, and finally, I would have a chance to calm the chaos. I hoped this would be the moment where all the pieces of the puzzle would fit together. The next morning, I drove to her house, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. As I pulled into her driveway, I took a deep breath and tried to steady my nerves. I didn't know what she was going to say, but I was ready for whatever it was. I knocked on the door, and when she opened it, her expression was soft, almost apologetic. Come in, dear, she said, her voice steady but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. We sat down in the living room, where we had shared countless conversations over the years. But today felt different. Today, everything had changed. I'm so sorry for all the pain I've caused you, she began, her voice shaking slightly. I've carried these secrets for so long, and I know I should have told you sooner. But I didn't want to hurt you. I thought it would be easier if you never knew the truth. I waited, my heart racing. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. She took a deep breath, and then she told me everything. Your father, he wasn't your biological father. He raised you as his own, but you're not his daughter by blood, she said, her eyes filled with regret. Your real father, his name was Michael. He was a good man, but he made some mistakes. I never told your father about Michael, and I kept it from you because I didn't want to cause any more pain than I already had. My world felt like it was spinning out of control. My grandmother's words were like a slap to the face, shattering everything I had known about my identity. "But why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why keep this from me all these years?" She wiped away a tear. "I thought it was for the best. Your real father didn't want anything to do with you. He didn't want to be a part of your life. I didn't want you to grow up feeling abandoned by him, so I kept him a secret. And when your father, the man you know as your dad, came into your life, I knew it would be easier for everyone if we just pretended that everything was normal." I sat in silence for a moment, processing her words. The pain was overwhelming, but beneath it, there was a sense of understanding. I could see now that my grandmother had only been trying to protect me in her own way. She had made decisions based on what she thought was best, but those decisions had come with a cost, one I was only beginning to understand. "And my father?" I asked quietly. "What did he say about all this?" She hesitated, her eyes downcast. "He never knew the full truth, not until recently. When he found out, he became angry. He felt betrayed by me for keeping it a secret. And he was worried about what would happen if you found out the truth." I felt a surge of anger toward my dad, but it was mixed with confusion. How could he have kept something so important from me? How could he have let me go through life thinking one thing, only to learn it wasn't true? Does he even care about me? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. My grandmother looked at me with a sad expression. "He does care about you. But he's afraid. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of what this will mean for his life and for yours." I took a deep breath and stood up, trying to process everything she had just told me. The weight of it all was too much to bear in one sitting. I needed to leave, to think. "I need time to think," I said softly. "I can't handle all of this right now." My grandmother nodded, understanding. "I know, dear. I know. Just remember, you are loved, and none of this changes who you are." I left her house that day with more questions than answers. I had learned the truth, but the truth didn't make anything easier. It only complicated things further. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There was still so much more to uncover, and now that I had started this journey, there was no turning back. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone control my story anymore. I was going to take control of my life, and no matter what came next, I was ready to face it head on.